Elohim nisa et Avraham. The Eternal tested Avraham. This is how we begin that Torah portion that might start our year by making us feel a little tense. But personally, if there's one thing that my 5 years at St. Paul's more than 20 years ago helped me do, it's to prepare for the test. I was once alarmed when, at the beginning of rabbinical school, I tested in a large group into the top set for modern Hebrew without being able to speak hardly a word, simply because I knew how to prepare for a test, and multiple choice is easy with a certain logic. So, what's required of Avraham in this test? And by understanding this, how can we better prepare for the test of life in the year ahead? The ultimate tested Avraham. What is the test? The Sforno in 16th century Italy says that what's being tested is Avraham's capacity to act, his ability to show that his love and fear of the eternal are not purely theoretical, but he can act. And according to the Sforno also, the defining feature of the divine is the ability to bring to fruition. So for Sforno, it's in acting that we come closest to the divine image within us. We might find inspiration in the Sforno to decide what we want to do this year to contribute to what most matters to us. And we might also find inspiration in the Sforno to seize our agency every day with acts, however small the mitzvah. But the Sforno is, of course, difficult because what Avraham is being asked to act on, we would hope, is unthinkable, which logically might make it a certain test of action, but extremely uncomfortable. But anyway, in the spirit of multiple choice, we might find a confusingly equally correct answer from the 19th century Hasidic Rabbi, the Meir Shloach. Elohim nisa et Avraham, the ultimate tested Avraham, and the Meir Shloach says that what's really being tested is the size of Avraham's faith or discernment, godel ha'emunah. What's being tested, he says, is Avraham's trust that the true merciful God would never ask such a thing. This is why, he says, the Torah instructs us that it is Elohim, that long name that connotes divinity, that speaks to Avraham in the first half of the story. Because, the Meir Shloach says, that term suggests an unclearness of communication and also immoderacy and severity. So, the Meir Shloach says Avraham can pass the test by having faith or trust or discernment beyond intellect alone, to be able to see in the face of difficulty, unclearness, contraries, and to be able to discern that the merciful dictates that a parent's compassion conquers all, that compassion conquers all. So to take on this test in our lives in the year ahead, we recognize now that living means perennially figuring out the terms of the test. That living means committedly returning to the question of how can I live well without ever quite figuring it out. This needs courage and openness. This is attacking a test in a completely different way to how I was once taught. One needs to speak to others. It's almost cheating in the past. One needs to reflect with oneself. So ask now at the beginning of the year and every day, what's being asked of you? What's important to you? How can you best contribute? Spend more time every week, every day, figuring out what's being called, being open to the unresolved, never-ending moral call. This is what our Judaism's for, to confront the meaning of multiple possible meanings and answers, to fine-tune your intuition and your perception, and to consequently act as right as you can in the moment and on any given day. I'm most moved in the learning we do here, say on a Friday night, when people respond authentically and personally to Torah, and they disagree. And they often disagree with me, and they're both right, and you might even be moved by what the other person has said. This approach to life is less focused on doing, on what should I do, but rather involves asking, how should I live? Our fundamental commitments become those actions that liberate us to re-engage in this question. Conversations with others, spiritual practice to challenge our souls, conversations around texts and with texts that offer multiple answers that might be poignant and moving. I'm grateful for Judaism bringing me together with others that prompt me to reevaluate how to live. What are the terms of the tests? I will always remember when I was studying in New York in an intensive adult text study environment, and I was falling in love with this committed intellectual tradition, admiring the great knowledge of my teachers. The program also mandated us to spend an afternoon a week just sitting with people in a nursing home. And that aspect of the program began with a rabbinic chaplain coming from the nursing home to do some teaching with us and then show us around the home. And while that rabbi was teaching us, I began to feel that he didn't know as much as the teachers in the institute I was studying. I began to think, I hope I don't, as a rabbi, end up with that middling level of knowledge. And then as he was taking us around the home, an elderly woman with her Zimmer frame stopped and grabbed his shoulder and turned to our whole group and slightly teared up as she said to us, "You'll never meet a kinder man than this." I'm grateful for a Judaism that compels those moments of reevaluation from other people. And I'm also grateful for these teachings that in their open-endedness compel such reevaluation. During the pandemic, somebody who I didn't know zoomed into our communal learning and shared her personal situation when we went around the Zoom room, not in depth, but it sounded difficult. I later got in touch with her and found out that she had gotten engaged with someone from America who had been planning to move, but not long before the pandemic had suddenly fallen ill and had been diagnosed with a fragile, complex, and possibly fatal condition. He was living in hospital in New York. She was unable to visit the country at that time, let alone the hospital. And on our Zoom call, we teased out whether there was anything I might do, however modestly, to help. And it became clear that in the face of perceived helplessness, she was feeling much guilt and pain, as we so often do in the face of difficulty. We spent some Zoom calls learning Torah together. She said she felt liberated as we encountered texts that permitted one to ask if there's anyone in charge, and that resolve that sometimes the required response is simply crying. V'nisa Elohim et Avraham, the ultimate tested Avraham. We pass this test by regularly questioning its terms and asking, how do we live? We begin the year with the Akedah to indicate that our Judaism can powerfully turn us to how to live without offering facile answers. One can leave certainty and easy answers to a certain type of theist or a certain type of atheist. Now in this year, we each become more Yisrael, those that wrestle with the human and with the divine, those that wrestle with life and persistently return to what's being asked of us. If we're not thinking and feeling frequently about our response to life, then we're failing. If you sometimes feel that moment of anxiety when you're not sure quite what you've achieved, then that might be an appropriate invitation to return to the question. If you're not feeling that anxiety and are rather satisfied with what you're accumulating, whether that be position, money, achievements, you're just imposing certain terms on that test, and that too might be an invitation to return to the question. We confront inequality and suffering in the world beyond us, and the fundamental question of what one can do, along with constant competing demands, with family, with work. We pass the test, we live well by confronting the question of how to live. Ve'Elohim nisat Avraham, the ultimate tested Abraham, except apparently in a third and final response to that line, some didn't understand the words that way at all, not as testing. Rabbi Abraham ibn Ezra in the 12th century Spain mentions an understanding of that line that he really doesn't like. He says, Yeshomer, there are some that say that really the word nisa, tested, should be the homonym, the same sounding word with two different letters, nisa, meaning lifted up or forgave. The ultimate lifted up Avraham. The ultimate forgave Avraham. And then Rabbi Ibn Ezra goes on to say, no way, you can't just change two letters. The whole story doesn't fit this reading. And Anshe Shakul Dat, people of sound minds, will not understand it this way. What can we learn from this Sayat Avraham? I may not always be a fully sound mind. And if this drasha were a test marked by Rabbi Abraham Ibn Ezra, then I might fail for in part plumping for completely the wrong answer. But I think it's a beautiful answer for this time of year, potentially resonant. The ultimate lifted up Avraham, singled him out by name and spoke to him. So we should look now and at this time of year for uplift, to be uplifted. And we should prioritize lifting up others, letting them know we are with them. The ultimate also forgave Avraham. So we should embrace forgiveness, doing all we can to forgive ourselves for our errors, our disappointments, the hurts we've caused, and to forgive others. Recall for this year what lifts you up, what moves you, and do more of it. There's a growth that can only come from opening yourself up to others and to experience. There's a living that can only happen with the committed openness of love. Schedule more of the enjoyment that is genuinely uplifting and ennobling. Do more of it. It might sometimes help us to motivate ourselves to live well, to take on life as if it's a test. But sometimes we can't live life as a test. Some of us need to let go of the frequent thought of all the answers that we're getting wrong, all the ways we're not achieving 100%, which can feel like failing. So this year, we might do more and more of what's important to us. We might commit to continue to ask what's being asked of me. How can I live right? And we might simply seek that which lifts us up. However good or bad you were at preparing towards tests, what we're doing now is different. It's living life. And we do this best when we know that none of us has the answers. Shana Tova.